Hello everybody, and welcome back to Space Engine. It's been a while, as per usual. I seem to be doing these about once a month now. I might increase that cadence, I'm not sure. But I kind of like my current setup where I do, you know, more of the scripted science videos, and then these videos, a little bit less. But still doing them. I have no desire to stop. I just like trying out new things on this channel. And I find that I actually really enjoy doing the scripted science ones. They're always fun to put together. A lot of work, mind you. Like, I have two scripts right now I have to do recordings for at some point. One of them's like my next actual science video, and then I'm also working on a Halloween video, which people might like, they might not, who knows. It's not going to be educational, it's just I'm doing a reading of something. But, it should be interesting. Anyways, yeah, this is Saturn. I think this was for my last video, I was grabbing footage of Titan, so I just end up here in Saturn. But this is actually a good place to start because I was asked to talk about what it would take to, like, for people to reach the furthest, like, corners of the solar system, like, really, really far out there. And that is a very interesting question and a very fun topic. So we're going to dive right in. And by dive right in, I mean we're going to Eris. Because why not? It's quite the ways out there. Yeah, the solar system is actually quite expansive, and where it ends is kind of. It depends on what metric you're going with. Because, like, if you're talking about planets, then the solar system pretty much ends by Neptune. Unless there's a planet X further out, in which case, well, I guess it ends out there. If you're going with, like, solar medium, so like the solar wind versus interstellar space, then that ends out past Neptune in the bow shock, where the solar winds actually slow down and stop, and then there's a transition between solar winds out to interstellar space. That's kind of the one that a lot of people go with, and in that case, Voyager 1 and 2 are currently in interstellar space. But if you're talking about the sun's gravitational influence, then that extends out further because the Oort cloud is technically bound to the sun, well, gravitationally, and it extends out, at least 2 light years, like halfway to Alpha Centauri. But the binding there is so weak that you could probably just say, nah, the solar system probably ends at the bow shock, like the Terminator between solar winds and interstellar medium, and that's a good metric. I like that metric personally. Oort clouds are just kind of weakly bound shells around stars. But yeah, how would we get out here? Well, I mean, there's nothing stopping us from going right now. It just takes a long time. So, of course, if you want to send people out this far, the obvious things are speed and safety. Speed's actually a big part of safety because the faster it takes to get places and come back, the less radiation you're exposed to, the closer you are to help, things like that. So, speed's an important one. And I guess out here, radiation isn't as big of a deal because, well, solar radiation isn't, anyways. Cosmic radiation still is. So you would need to, protect against that. But I would say, yeah, speed's probably the best option. So we'd want an engine that could get us out to places like Eris at a reasonable time frame. Because, like, New Horizons made it out to Pluto in 10 years. And it was going pretty fast. But it's like 10 years. Ugh. That's a bit much. But of course, it relied on. Well, actually, it was a direct descent and then a gravity assist from Jupiter. But still, it's like chemical engines aren't really going to cut it. My cat is currently standing on things, but don't worry about him. So I would say the best bet to get out to like the furthest reaches of the solar system would have to be, well, better engines. If we can get nuclear saltwater rockets to operate properly, I would say those could work. However, there's problems with them. Like neutrons tend to like reflect back and can cause problems. I like to think if you add like the actual reaction mass, like the water mass between the engine bell and like the, what is it, beryllium carbide tubes that contain, or boron carbide tubes that contain the nuclear salts, then that might help. And if you make it a pulse thing, so it pulses, that could also help. But either way, nuclear saltwater rockets are essentially torch drives, which means they can burn continuously from, you know, departure to arrival, which means you can go very, very fast because you're constantly accelerating and then you flip around and then just decelerate and then you get there. So instead of having to take like circular orbital paths in your, you know, your average orbital transfers, you could just go straight there, like just boom. And with that kind of performance, we could get, you know, out to the outer solar system in a matter of weeks. Like, we could get out to Saturn in a couple weeks, Eris in a little bit longer than that. Like, that would really, really open things up in terms of travel about the solar system. Unfortunately, nuclear saltwater rockets are quite dangerous, and we haven't really tested them because, on paper, they're ludicrous. I think they're cool though, so I'm all for it. Another option, of course, is the Orion drive, which I talk about a lot. And that one's a good one because, again, that could also, similar performance. You can get out to Eris in, you know, 3 or 4 months with one. Get to Mars in just a few weeks. So, yeah, that's pretty much the answer to that question. It's like, how can we send people out to the furthest reaches of the solar system? It would, well, there's a lot of things, but it would require, foremost, better engine technology, because we'd have to get out to places quickly. Oh, Mars, let's go there. And I am all for getting out places quickly. And then, of course, you'd have to work on other things, such as radiation mitigation, psychological issues, make your ships big, so that there's a lot of room. But you can't always bet on the psychology of people, so... One second, my cat wants to be let out. And away he goes. I could have paused that, but pausing that requires me to edit these videos. And I don't really like editing my space engine videos. I was actually getting ready to do recording for other videos, but I decided not to and do this instead. So, my mood isn't really, like, how do I describe it? I'm not really geared up for a space engine video right now. I was more geared up for other things. So that's why my cadence feels a little off, because I wasn't expecting to do space engine, but I figured, I can do this now, and I can do the recordings later. So, ooh, Earth. I'm fond of Earth. We haven't been to Earth in a while. Boop. Look at that. Beautiful. And the ice-free Arctic. Accurate. You know, people keep saying that Europe is a continent, but it really isn't. It's honestly just a piece of Asia. So, like, Eurasia, like that whole landmass. But then again, one could argue that if you look down here by the Red Sea, Africa is also technically connected. Okay, back up. Weird. Africa is technically connected to Asia right here. So there's actually, you know, there's people who say that there's really just one big continent over here, which is made up of Europe, Africa, and Asia. I'm willing to give Africa more credence because it's far more separated, and the only real connections is this little itty-bitty piece over here, which is actually currently cut up through with canals, so... But Europe, it's like, nah, man, it's not a continent. People are like, oh, what about mountains? It's like, mountains don't count. If mountains counted as geographical divide between continents, then North America would be divvied up into two, because there's a big mountain range that runs through here. I live next to it, it's the Rocky Mountains. And there's Italy. Italy's fun. Well, sometimes. Australia, fun. It's an island and a continent. It also is like the only country that if it was playing Risk would have a card. You know, because like in the board game Risk, if you take over entire territory, you get like a bonus card. And the hell was that? My headset went. Oh, it turned off. Okay. Yeah, I got a new headset today, a wireless one, because my wired one, after faithful service of what 4 years, the cable started breaking and it stopped. It started becoming sketchy. The speakers still work fine, like they sound great. It's just the wire was breaking and it kept cutting out, which really annoys me. Like the wire always like it's like the speakers work great, but the wire breaks and then the entire thing is no longer functional. So I replaced it with a wireless headset because if my headset's gonna break, I want the speakers to break. Like, I want it to be like an actual failure of the technology that makes it unusable. I hate when like, oh, the wire breaks, but the rest of it works great. It's like, all right, so the cheapest part of the headset breaks and you can't use it anymore. So I got a wireless one and it just beeped telling me that it's turning off because there's no sound playing through it for 15 minutes. And I'm getting used to that still. What is this? Oh, hip. Yeah, we're just gonna leave the solar system now. We're just gonna go on adventures. Uh, it's been quite the week, hasn't it? Oh, Nebula. What else happened? Oh, lots happened. There's been a bunch of launches. James Webb released some really nice pictures. A Japanese rocket exploded. That wasn't fun. The space station is still doing its thing. I don't know. There's a lot going on, and I haven't really been paying attention to it all that much. I've been just busy working mostly. I got a whole bunch of orders from my Etsy shop like this last couple of weeks. I've just been printing off stuff nonstop and shipping things, which is great fun. I'm glad that happens every now and then, but it's just like when it happens all at once, it's like I actually need to go and print off print off some kits beforehand, so I have like a stock at this point. Because printing on demand, I like it, but when I get a whole bunch of orders, it really backs up. But oh well. And beyond that, not much else been going on. Been writing, reading, printing, doing yard work. That's pretty boring. Oh boy. Oh my goodness. All right. What do we have here? It is an orange giant. That is wonderful. Actually, I recently discovered that if I turn off like a whole bunch of news off of my Twitter and just my phone, my life is so much better because it's like I don't care. Actually, I started just blocking politicians on Twitter because I don't care about their musings. They're all idiots, so it's like I'm not gonna listen to them. Even the ones that I like support, it's like I don't want to hear you talking on Twitter. Go do your job. So I've just like started blocking politicians. And yeah, you know what? It makes my life a lot better to not have to have that dribble in my Twitter feed. Especially because like people will like or not like, but usually the people I follow will share politicians in the states just to dunk on them. And it's like, all right, you're forcing me to see something I don't want to see, which is a very dumb comment made by some politician in a foreign country. And it makes me really like kind of concerned about Americans. It's like, are you guys all right? Like your politicians say some pretty dumb stuff, and I'm genuinely concerned. Like I saw one, I forgot who it was. I don't know. I think some Republican, but they made a comment where it's like there are no pronouns in the U.S. Constitution, and I thought it was fake at first, so I looked it up and it was real, and I'm like, how can you, how can you speak English and say that? Because like what's funny about it is literally the very first word in the US Constitution is a pronoun. In fact, it's on the document, it's the biggest word written. It's we. We is a pronoun. We the people, we. And it's like do you not know that we is a pronoun? or that I is a pronoun, or they, them, us. Like, and that same person, I think it was the same person. It might have been, but they made some comment about there not being pronouns in the Bible, and it's like I've read the Bible. There's a lot of pronouns in it. Thou is a pronoun, and that one's used a lot. Granted, it's a translation, but also he, she, they, us, I, we. Those are all used, and it's like, well, to be fair on that point, I've just come to the conclusion that most Christians don't read the Bible, so which they should. It's an interesting read. Like I don't, I'm not, I'm not religious. I guess my spirituality is complicated. I'm not religious, but I still find like reading texts like that interesting and useful because it's history, or at least it's historic and it's culturally valuable. Plus, both my parents have theology degrees, and my dad was a pastor, so of course I've read the Bible, and it's fascinating. Like, oh, actually, I learned something the other day about it, which it falls into the category. I don't know, I'm just bumbling around. Of like, if you learn something that contradicts something that you thought, and like, how do you respond to that? Do you just ignore it, or do you update your like what you think? And I had that happen the other day, because I've always had this like when I talk about the history of the Bible, which I do frequently apparently. I'll frequently mention how the New Testament was canonized by the Council of Nicaea, which was, a bunch of people who came together and did some stuff. And I always would say that, and it's like, yeah, the Bible was just arbitrarily put together by the Council of Nicaea. And I was looking into it because I thought, I haven't actually looked into that. And it turns out that that's actually a common misconception, which made me feel better because it means I'm not the only one. But it's not really correct. The Council of Nicaea focused on what it was like trying to bring all the different versions under one like umbrella, but they never focused on canonizing the Bible. But what did do that was other councils kind of independently throughout a number of years, where it's like everyone had their own kind of version of scripture of different. It's like there were a ton of books, and it all eventually a number of them kind of whittled down to 27 of these books, and they had them in different orders and stuff. But then this one council decided to canonize them into more what we would notice, like, or what we would recognize as the canon of the New Testament. And then other councils, like the Third Council of Rome, I believe, did one. Oh, what's the name of that one? It was like the Council of something, or the Second Council of something. Whatever, not important. Anyways, point is, it's like, so what I've been saying was technically correct in a general sense, that the New Testament was canonized arbitrarily by councils, but I was using the wrong one. I was saying Nicaea when it wasn't. So after reading that, it's like, that's very good to know. So I've since updated my my view, or I say, yeah, I've updated my views on that, and I feel much better knowing that I have a much more accurate understanding of the topic now, because it's really interesting. Like, theology is actually very interesting, even if you don't believe it. It's fascinating stuff. And one I find interesting as well is the depictions of hell in the Bible. Because when you think of hell in the Western world, you usually think of like a fiery pit full of flames and demons and eternal torture and brimstone and all that. But that's never actually discussed in the Bible ever. Like, the description of hell in the Bible is very complicated and kind of contradictory. Because way back in the Old Testament, hell is described as being analogous to Gehenna, which was basically a burn pit outside of the city walls where they just burn trash, and would also send people like, I think, lepers, and if you break the law, you're basically told to go stand out by the burn pit. So it was like, when they described it, it's like, were they describing the actual burn pit itself, or were they describing just the area around the burn pit full of sad people who were kicked out of the city walls, as an analogy for like being separated from Jesus or whatever? Well, actually, at the time it would have just been God. But it's interesting. So Gehenna was mentioned a couple times, but earlier on, there wasn't really a hell, But the afterlife was Sheol, which was an ancient Hebrew concept of the afterlife, which was basically an area of perpetual darkness and gloom under the earth, where the dead go, but with no separation. Like there was no heaven or hell. It's just you die, you go to Sheol. And later on, it was that like in the translation, Sheol was replaced with Hades because they were basically the same thing. So in some of the New Testament, you actually have Jesus mention Hades, and it's like the Greek afterlife. Okay, and it's interesting. But you might be wondering, like, well, then where does all this depictions come from? And our depictions of hell actually come from Dante's Inferno, which was, you know, it was fiction. It was literary. It wasn't a part of the Bible. It was actually, I think it was a religious satire at the time. And there is mention of a lake of fire and brimstone, but it isn't hell. It's the only time it's brought up is it's the place that Satan's gonna be sent to with all of his minions in the end times. But it's not where humans go. So it's like interesting. But in the Bible, generally, it's mostly described as being a dark place. There is one reference of eternal suffering in Hades, or burning for eternity in Hades. But again, there's a lot lost in translation, so what they meant by that is questionable. But it's interesting. Like I find it fascinating. So I have no idea why we got to this topic. Oh right, I was talking about muting people on Twitter, and then started talking about theology because it's interesting. I find history fun. I find literary stuff fun. Like I was the other day, I was reading a whole bunch of just like public domain poetry. It's really interesting. A lot of fun stuff there. I have no idea where we are, but this is cool. 22 minutes. All right, I need to end it off there. This was very rambly. I apologize, but I hope you found something interesting. The people who generally watch these videos are the ones who just like hearing my voice, so I appreciate that. If you have ideas for topics for me to talk about, let me know, or places to go, let me know in the comments below. And thank you all for watching. I hope you enjoyed, and space.